You're telling me that Jungle Ezreal is back? What's going on, summoners? My name is Irene, and I'm here with another video on Korean builds. This time, we're covering all the hottest new builds you need to know about on patch 10.12. Make sure you watch this video all the way through though, so you can find that information you need to have an edge over your opponents. I do want to quickly mention though, that we have started a Discord community as well as a subreddit. This is our way of trying to connect with you guys, so make sure to hop on board. Check the description for links to join either of those. For our question of the day though, what previous champion and build was your biggest nightmare? In other words, what was something that was strong, but you absolutely do not miss? I remember the days of Tank Echo, and oh boy, I'm still kind of scarred by them. The guy just would not die. He was extremely mobile and still did a million damage. Let me know your answers in the comments below. Kicking off the video, we've got a build for none other than the reworked Vola Bear. There's been a big question over how good new Vola Bear actually is ever since his re-release. Vola Bear's statistics have been promising, but following a hotfix buff, things have been looking much brighter for the big guy. One reason that players aren't finding wins on him is obviously that he's a new champion and people haven't gotten a complete grasp over how to play him. On that same notion, players probably haven't figured out the optimal build for a new champion either. After some experimenting, it seems like the Koreans have figured it out, and it honestly isn't anything groundbreaking. You basically use a tank build, the kind where you're trying to carry games. First, let's talk about his runes though. For runes, you'll want to run Press the Attack, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand, and then Demolish and Second Wind. Press the Attack is an extremely powerful keystone on Vola Bear because his W applies on hit effects. This includes Press the Attack. You only need to auto attack twice and cast your W once in order to activate Press the Attack on an enemy. After applying the Exposed Weakness debuff onto an enemy, Vola Bear and his teammates are able to deal a decent amount of increased damage onto whoever Vola Bear is focusing. For the item builds, you'll build a Sunfire Cape, Iceborne Gauntlet, Ninja Tabi, Spirit Visage, Sterix Gauge, and a Deadman's Plate. This build is a solid choice on Vola Bear, and you can get a decent amount of value with an Iceborne Gauntlet. Vola Bear's W short cooldown allows him to proc the passive multiple times over the course of skirmishes and teamfights. In addition to this, you'll gain 30% cooldown reduction with this build, reducing the cooldown on all of his abilities. This is crucial as it'll allow Vola Bear to spam his W and also allow him to ulti much more frequently. There's just something about champion reworks in the top lane. Our next top lane build is a shocker. We've got Fiddlesticks top lane with Aftershock. Aftershock Fiddlesticks was thought to be long gone, but surprises come in all shapes and sizes, even the menacing ones. As a side note, we're also seeing this build played down in the bottom lane as a support as well. It's kind of hard to believe that Fiddlesticks top is working, but it is. Rather than opting for a typical AP build, however, the Koreans have started playing Fiddlesticks top as a tank. A big reason this is possible is because Riot decided to buff up Fiddlesticks' wave clear. They buffed his W so that it would deal more damage to minions, and players have quickly taken advantage of this buff by pushing Fiddlesticks into territory we never thought that we'd see him in. For runes, you'll take Aftershock, Demolish, Conditioning, Revitalize, and then Monoflow Band and Transcendence. This is a tank build. It only makes sense that you'll want to take Aftershock. Fiddlesticks has no problem whatsoever activating this keystone. Demolish is nice to take as well, since Fiddlesticks is a ranged champion, and whenever he pushes to an enemy turret, this is an opportunity for him to proc Demolish and pick up some free gold. Conditioning and Revitalize make Fiddlesticks even more tanky and obnoxious. And finally, Monoflow Band provides Fiddlesticks the extra mana he needs to take lane priority, while Transcendence allows Fiddlesticks to comfortably hit 40% cooldown reduction before he finishes all of his items. His items are Frozen Heart, Spirit Visage, Ninja Tabi, Zhonya's Hourglass, Randuin's Omen, and Void Staff. Frozen Heart is actually a must. It provides Fiddlesticks with armor, an attack speed debuff aura, cooldown reduction, and even mana. The extra survivability it provides synergizes really well with the cooldown reduction, as this will allow Fiddlesticks to cast his W more often, and also ensures his survival when he does. Throw in Spirit Visage and you gain increased healing, more tank stats, and even more cooldown reduction. Next up in the top lane, we've got Lethality Lucian top. Now, before you start doubting, we're gonna tell you that it's not a full Lethality Lucian build. An item or two at most, and they're probably not the ones that you were expecting when we labeled this build as a Lethality build. We're actually seeing none other than your favorite 80 carry playing top lane Chinese pro, the Shy, using various Lethality items to shake up the meta. Lethality is a solid purchase on Lucian. He deals a ton of physical damage and has incredibly high basic attacks as well as spell damage. A little bit of lethality goes a long way. especially against champions that haven't built any armor. The items in question are Sanguine Blade and Edge of Night. Although Sanguine Blade isn't very common, this item is packed with a ton of bonus stats, especially in the late game. Edge of Night is a little easier to understand and is a more vanilla item, but it makes a ton of sense to build it on Lucian. On top of providing some lethality, it also grants Lucian a spell shield like a Banshee's Veil does. An extra safety net makes an already slippery marksman even harder to catch. For the runes, take Press the Attack, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, and Coup, Magical Footwear, and Biscuit Delivery to round it out. And for items, you want to build a Blade of the Ruined King, Berserker's Greaves, Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire Cannon, Edge of Night, and Infinity Edge. That's going to cover our top lane builds, so we'll recap them all on the screen right now. Make sure to take a look one last time at those builds. We've got a couple of new builds in the jungle coming right up for you guys. And by the way guys, if you're enjoying this sort of content, please make sure to click that subscribe button down below. It would help us out so much, and we want to continue bringing you guys the best content that we can. As players are rushing to find the most optimal build for League's newest jungler Volibear, there's definitely going to be a lot of variance and experimentation. One such build is Volibear Jungle with Predator. This keystone just received changes this patch, and it's looking pretty spicy. Volibear, like other juggernauts, struggles with getting in. Predator alleviates this, and the reduced cooldown on it helps Predator junglers fit in more ganks during the early game. Now for the runes. You'll run Predator, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ingenious Hunter, and then you'll take Water Walking and Celerity. Like most Predator builds, you need to run Ingenious Hunter. This will lower the cooldown of Predator boots significantly, especially if you're successful in taking out your targets. By the late game, as long as you've hopefully gathered all 5 stacks, you should be able to basically cast Predator on less than a minute cooldown, searching for hard engages or picks wherever you can find them. For items, you'll build a standard Volibear jungle build with Cinder Hulk, Mercury Treads, Trinity Force, Spirit Visage, Deadman's Plate, and Titanic Hydra. Admittedly, you're going to lose out on some damage or sustain by choosing this setup over Conqueror or Aftershock. However, mobility is the biggest issue that champions like Volibear face. So, if you don't think your duels or skirmishes are going to be close, definitely consider investing your keystone into mobility rather than damage. A great example of this is with Trundle, who's running Phase Rush. He already deals plenty of damage, so players choose to run Phase Rush to ensure that he can stick onto his targets and chase them down. Now, believe it or not, Jungle Ezreal is making his return to Summoner's Rift. The majority of marksmen received a nice little buff onto their base health. This buff was enough to bring Ezreal back into the jungle, and some pros have started putting time into him. He is definitely a decent pick, especially if you need a marksman or a jungler that can outrange the enemies. When playing Jungle Ezreal, make sure that you only take W at level 3 if you're planning to gank a lane. Otherwise, put your 3rd skill point into Q and level W at level 4. Alternatively, you cannot put a point into it until level 13. The reason you're not prioritizing W is that it won't help you clear your own jungle, although it'll help you deal some bonus damage to epic monsters. Definitely put some thought into it, but for most of you guys, your first 4 skill points are going to be used in this order: Q, E, then Q again, and then W. For the runes, run Conqueror, Presence of Mind, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Magical Footwear, and Cosmic Insight. Presence of Mind is slightly more important on Jungle Ezreal since you won't have a tier to guarantee a giant mana pool. Iceborne Gauntlet provides a decent amount of mana, and running Presence of Mind will make sure that you always have enough to get by. For items, they're very similar to a bottom lane Ezreal build. You're replacing Manamune with the Warrior enchant, however. Build a Warrior with Skirmisher's Saber, Iceborne Gauntlet, Ninja Tabi, Blade of the Ruined King, Death's Dance, and a flex item, usually Mercurial Scimitar. This build makes you rather tanky with Iceborne Gauntlet, Death's Dance, and even Challenging Smite. That covers the jungle builds this patch. Make sure to take one final look at the screen for a recap of them, because next up is the mid lane. Starting off the mid lane, we have Phase Rush Talon. Give this mobile assassin some more mobility, and it's basically impossible to catch him. More importantly, it's impossible to run away from him. Talon has an extremely easy time activating Phase Rush as well. Just like how he activates Electrocute, Talon can use his W, Q, and even R alongside basic attacks to basically proc his keystone instantly. Talon has less sustain than before, and as a result, a hit-and-run playstyle might just be what he needs in order to survive in the cruel world that is mid lane. Rest in peace, as the lane is getting nerfed too. Anyway, Phase Rush isn't necessarily the next meta Talon build. It's an alternative rune choice based on playstyle. An assassin usually wants to maximize their damage to snowball games hard. Phase Rush creates a more versatile playstyle, trading a little more damage for an incredible amount of mobility. Based on what champions you're up against, you'll need to consider whether you want to take this setup or not. For runes, run Phase Rush, Nimbus Cloak, Absolute Focus, Scorch, Taste of Blood, and Relentless Hunter. For items, you want to build a Tiamat, Boots of Mobility, Yomu's Ghostblade, Duskblade of Drakthar, Edge of Night, and a Black Cleaver. Once you've finished your build, you can upgrade Tiamat into a Ravenous Hydra. Our next mid lane build is one that we've mentioned before, but definitely needs to be mentioned again in light of the buffs to Summoner Spell Ghost. Unsealed Spellbook on Galio it is, boys. You gotta trust me on this one. Landing your taunt isn't as easy as before since you can't flash while you're charging it. However, running Nimbus Cloak and casting a Summoner Spell provides a ton of mobility that'll make it so much easier to lock up your opponents. Unsealed Spellbook gives you an arsenal of summoner spells you can burn to activate Nimbus Cloak, and therefore, more agency over your games. With Summoner Ghost receiving a massive buff, Unsealed Spellbook will have even more value as it'll allow Galio players to have access to it even if they chose not to run it as one of their 2 actual summoner spells. For runes, run Unsealed Spellbook, Magical Footwear, Minion Dematerializer, Time Warp Tonic, and then Nimbus Cloak and Transcendence. Minion Dematerializer provides Galio with that well-needed boost to his wave clear, while Time Warp Tonic provides some extra mobility in the early game while using potions. For items, build Hextech Proto Belt, Sorcerer Shoes, Zonia's Hourglass, Morellonomicon, Rabadon's Deathcap, and a Void Staff. That's it for the mid lane, so as always, take a peek at the screen for a recap of those builds. With the mid lane covered, let's move on to the bottom lane next. In spite of all the hype around Ezreal, we've got yet another Ezreal build for you guys. This time, it's Ezreal with Omni Stone. Ezreal is another one of those champions who can use practically any keystone pretty well. Conqueror, Press the Attack, Fleet Footwork, Summon Airy, and even Electrocute are all valid options on him. The low cooldown between each keystone you shuffle through with Omni Stone makes it hard to pass up at least trying. Another reason you want to try this build out is it allows you to take Magical Footwear, Biscuits, and Approach Velocity. Approach Velocity with Ezreal actually works wonders. Building an Iceborne Gauntlet gives you free slows, and from there, you'll be able to run your opponents down after you tag them with a single Q. Speaking of which, let's run through the builds and items. For runes, run Omni Stone, Magical Footwear, Biscuit Delivery, Approach Velocity, and then Nimbus Cloak and Gathering Storm. For the items, build Manamune, Ionian Boots of Lucidity, Iceborne Gauntlet, Blade of the Ruined King, Death's Dance, and Mortal Reminder. And following up on the Approach Velocity hype train is Ashe. While Approach Velocity isn't anything new on Ashe, it's definitely worth re-emphasizing its importance. Plenty of players were already taking Approach Velocity, but the importance of this rune is going to be reshaped by this patch. Ashe will become a much more common pick as all champions can now benefit from movement impairing crowd control like Ashe's. This build is super simple and straightforward. For runes, take Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, and Magical Footwear with Approach Velocity. For items, build Blade of the Ruined King, Berserker's Greaves, Infinity Edge, Mortal Reminder, and finally, a Phantom Dancer. While there's a split in player base taking either Inspiration or Sorcery second, it's likely that most Ashe players will begin taking the Inspiration tree for Approach Velocity simply because this rune received some changes this patch. Alright, that covers our bottom lane builds. It's nice and simple. Once again, take a look at your screen for a recap of those builds as we move on to the supports to wrap things up. We're actually running it back with Grasp of the Undying Senna. This build, which was featured in a previous installment of this series, is now the new meta build on Senna support. The reason for this, while there are many others, is that building a Frozen Mallet allows Senna to slow opponents with every attack and Q, while Glacial Augment has a cooldown that Senna needs to play around. Also, this build makes Senna a lot tankier, since she's building not only a Frozen Mallet, but a Black Cleaver and an Edge of Night as well. Okay, we just kind of spoiled the build for you guys, so let's just throw it up there so that you guys can see it real quickly. The runes are Grasp of the Undying, Font of Life, Second Wind, Overgrowth, and then Presence of Mind with Alacrity. Next, the items are Black Mist Scythe, Boots of Swiftness, Frozen Mallet, Black Cleaver, Edge of Night, and Mortal Reminder. Font of Life is highly underrated and often forgotten. With this Senna build, you'll be slowing enemies left and right, so make sure to run Font of Life so that your allies can take advantage of this even more by healing off enemies you tag. Since this build does feature a lot of bonus health, Senna's allies heal even more than they would otherwise. There's a ton of little synergies within this build that make it so strong, and I have to give some major props to whoever came up with it. And if you're playing support and you have a lot of ADs or people who basic attack on your team, you can also run Ardent Censer so that people heal off of the Font of Life and get the Ardent Censer buff. But that's only if you have a lot of those people on your team. Next up for supports is actually a build we mentioned at the beginning of the video, Aftershock Fiddlesticks. The only difference with the top version is that this one goes bottom and builds a bulwark of the mountain since it's a support build. You accomplish the same thing as the tank Fiddlesticks, and since this build makes Fiddlesticks a little beefier, he's better suited to survive in the bottom lane. This build makes Fiddlesticks basically as tanky as he was before the Aftershock nerfs gutted him. For runes, run Aftershock, Demolish, Conditioning, Revitalize, Monoflow Band, and Transcendence. Alternatively, you can use Domination as your secondary tree for Ingenious Hunter and a second rune of your choice. Ingenious Hunter provides cooldown for your trinket, or in Fiddlesticks' case, his effigies. These are a bit more impactful than normal trinket wards, so there is some merit to making this swap. Finally, for item builds, build a Bulwark of the Mountain, Frozen Heart, Spirit Visage, Ninja Tabi, Zhonya's Hourglass, and Aranduin's Omen, the last two also being affected by Ingenious Hunter. Our final support build is Phase Rush Set support. The boss is back in the bottom lane. You just can't get him out of there, can ya? I've heard people mention this before, but I actually want to know what you guys think. Consider this a second question of the day. Is Set just a guy version of Xayah? It can't be a complete coincidence, right? Like, they look too alike and, I mean, they're both Vestayan, but okay, wait, let's get back on topic, all right? Phase Rush on melee champions is absolutely insane. It provides 40 to 60% movement speed based on level. 40% is already a ridiculously high amount of bonus movement speed, and I need to see some more players take advantage of this keystone, not on just Set. With Set, however, this keystone makes him so threatening. When he manages to get in range for a stun, he'll almost instantly activate Phase Rush with 2 quick follow-up punches. After he manages to stun a target and attack twice, Set can use his immense burst of movement speed to get behind his main target and ulti them toward his team. Set already has a ton of damage built into his kit, and his W is an incredible ability that covers 2 bases at once. It serves both offensive and defensive purposes. For the runes, run Phase Rush, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, Water Walking, and then Hextech Flash Traption and Minion Dematerializer. For the items, you want Pauldrons of White Rock, Boots of Swiftness, Dead Man's Plate, Gargoyle Stoneplate, Knight's Vow, and a Locket of the Iron Solari. Alright, that wraps up our final set of builds. So make sure to check out the screen one last time where we've displayed them once again for you guys. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We really appreciate it. If you want more content like this, or even want a coach to help you improve, I highly recommend checking out ProGuides.com as well. Make sure to also check out the Discord and Reddit links I mentioned, and also subscribe to stay up to date with our daily uploads. With that said, I'll see you all next time.